Good afternoon. One more time. Good afternoon. That's what I'm talking about. Welcome back. Before I say anything else, I would like to ask you to please silence your cell phones. Anything else that has a battery, makes a sound unless it's making your heart pump, please turn it off. Because not only do we not want it to make a sound, we want you to be physically present in this space and in this place, because place does matter. So we have a wonderful opportunity this afternoon. I am pleased and honored to try to introduce Geoffrey Canada to you this afternoon. I'm going to keep my biographical introduction brief. I believe that there's a longer bio that's in your program, and I believe that he can tell you much better about who he is than I ever could. So with that, I will do my brief spiel, and then as they say in church, the next voice you will hear is the voice of Geoffrey Canada. In his 20-plus years with the Harlem's Children's Zone, Geoffrey Canada has become nationally recognized for his pioneering work helping children and families in Harlem, and as a passionate advocate for education reform. Since 1990, Mr. Canada has been the President and Chief Executive Officer of Harlem's Children's Zone, which the New York Times Magazine called one of the most ambitious social experiments of our time. In 1997, the agency launched the Harlem Children's Zone Project, which targets a specific geographic area in central Harlem with a comprehensive range of services. The Zone Project today covers 100 blocks and aims to serve over 10,000 children shortly. The work of Mr. Canada in Harlem's Children's Zone has become a national model and has been the subject of many profiles in the media. Most recently, he was seen prominently featured in the Davis Guggenheim documentary, Waiting for Superman. Yay! Instead of spending the next several minutes reading, I'm going to go ahead and let you hear that next voice. And with that, Geoffrey Canada.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stand. I'm really excited to be here. But I'm a little, I speak a lot, so I'm not usually intimidated. But you guys, wasn't Angela here?
Yes.
Yeah, see how they say, yeah, she was here. Yeah. See, Angela and I, we go way back. We would not have a Harlem Children's Zone if it wasn't for Angela Blackwell. She helped me conceive of this, to think it through. There's something about partnering with people who are smarter than you, right? So y'all think I'm kidding. I know Angela. That will allow you to get to the next level in life sometime, which I think is really important. Now, I know Angela told this story, but I don't know if she told this whole story about when we were together in Harlem. Rasuli and I and Angela, we were walking. Yes, it is my community. I do know the kids. I did hear, if you grow up in the hood, you got certain antenna, right? Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Other people are talking and laughing and joking, and you're like, what was that, right? So I'm hearing this behind me, this excitement that is a little too high. And I turn and I see the kids, and I immediately dismiss them. You know why? Because they're like all middle school kids. They're like this tall, right? No threat there, right? I'm a grown man. I know Steve Harvey, I almost said something wrong, right? I almost did. And so I saw the kids, but I knew something was going on, right? They were just too hyped up. And so I wanted to get Angela away, and then they were heading towards one of my schools. And I said, oh, this looks like a whole sort of gang thing going on. I'm not having it. I turn the corner of 125th Street, and I see 3 boys, and one of them sees me, and he says, no, cool, chill. And he does like this. I realized he was just showing those other 2 kids a gun. So now this kid, 12, 13 maybe? Kid's this tall. He's right there, he's got a gun. Now, I'm a black belt in Taekwondo, and 15 years ago, I would have taken that gun. Can I tell you this? But at 60, you know, those reflexes aren't what they should be. And I don't want to be fumbling around with some kid with a gun. Here's why place matters. So I see the kid with the gun. I know all those kids are hyping this one kid up to shoot somebody. Right? They're all pumping him up. You can do it there. You got the hammer. They're going to let the hammer down. All that. I'm like, no murder today in Harlem. I get on my phone. I call 911. Right? Say, look, there's a kid right here. I'm looking at him. He's got a gun. You guys need to come right now. No one ever showed up. No one ever showed up. I'm following this kid now for the next 15 minutes trying to stop something that I know is going to happen. After that crew goes, we watch the kid, they can't find the kid they're looking for. They leave. The next day, I tell my team, these kids have been coming back to the same place looking for this group of kids. We know they got guns. I say, we're gonna make sure they don't come back anymore. How do we do that? I say, well, we're gonna get all of our young adults on the corners with cameras. So you know what happens? You have 30 kids together. They feel anonymous. They're like, no one knows who I am. I'm just with a bunch of other kids. When no group of 30 kids came around that corner and they saw cameras looking at them, they all were like, nope, not doing this today. I'm not going to get caught. The police, on the other hand, I called the captain and told him, A, what had happened, and B, what I was going to do if it happened again, right? Going to go right to the mayor. How dare you not show up when someone says there's a kid with a gun? How dare you do that? You wouldn't do that downtown. I know better than that. So now I got in my office 4 angry police officers, sergeants and others, because I squealed on them. You're going to say we didn't show up. I said, you didn't show up. They said, no, we came. I said, not for 30 minutes. They said, oh, we thought it was maybe 35 minutes. I said, see, 35 minutes with a kid with a gun. What does life mean to you guys? What does it take? What do you have to say to get an immediate response in our community? So now you know what happens? If they get a call from yours truly, guess what happens? Those cops are there within minutes. I ain't listening to that guy. He go on calling the captain, everybody else. Some places aren't treated like other places, right? They're just not treated. It's not the same sense of urgency. It's like, yeah, big deal, kid with a gun, who cares, right? Happens all the time. No, it doesn't. It only happens if you let it happen. And those of us who said, not my community, you know what, you're going to treat my community like everybody here make over $100,000. That's how we want everybody to treat us. Anything less than that, it just simply is not going to work. Now look, we've been on national news, 60 Minutes, all of those kind of things, and that was never the point of any of this. Paul Tuff's book, Waiting for Superman, the fact that the president has put money in there, they're doing promised neighborhoods around the country. None of that I had planned out. I simply wanted to save my kids in my community. And I want to get back to you about why this is so important. But I have to say this one thing. You know, we did 60 Minutes, and the first time I did 60 Minutes, it was with that wonderful, wonderful journalist, Ed Bradley, right before Ed passed away. We were one of the last things Ed did. 60 Minutes is a funny kind of show. I've been watching that show about 50 years, right? It's always got the same plot, right? You get some scoundrel, right? Lying and cheating, and then they come on 60 Minutes and they get busted. So, Ed and I know one another, and one day Ed says, hey, Jeff, we never did a show on 60, on the Harlem Children's Zone. What do you think? I said, Ed, I think that'd be great. Let's do it. So he comes to my office, and, we're just laughing and joking and everything, and then Ed says, okay, let's begin. Everything gets quiet. The glasses come down on the nose like this. And I say, Ed, wait a second. I said, Ed, look, if you know something, let's just get right to it. All right, don't string this thing out for a half an hour, right? Now, I thought, if you had a message, right, for America, 60 Minutes was the show to do. 25 million viewers, they turn in every week for news, but I was wrong. Do you know whose show you have to do if you really want to reach America? Oprah. Everybody knows it was Oprah's show, right? I was sleeping Oprah. I know everybody knows Oprah, but I didn't really know. This was my first clue. If I'm going to do 60 Minutes, I say to my wife and kids, I'm going to do 60 Minutes. They say, great, have fun. The president wanted me to come to the White House to do something. Wait, so I'm going to the White House. Say hi for us, right? Nothing. So I'm sitting around the dinner table. I say, oh, next week I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to do Oprah. And they said, you? I said, yes, me. I said, well, did you get tickets? I'm like, tickets? I didn't even know you needed tickets, right? So I call Oprah's folks. They do the worst thing possible. She gives me 7 tickets. See, if Oprah gives me 2 tickets, that's my wife, that's my mother. 7? Everybody in your family thinks they're in the top 7, right? My whole family's like, we're going to Oprah. No, you're not. So you say, okay, Jeff, so you're doing the TVs and all of that stuff. Why? Because there is something really fundamentally wrong with the way our country is working with its young people. I mean, this is not a minor issue, and I thought it was a small issue in a few places with names like Harlem. That's what I thought, right? And I thought you could name those places, right? So Harlem, Bed-Stuy, South Central, maybe Camden. You could sort of name some places, and you know what? I began to travel around the country, and I began to find out this thing is much deeper than that. There's something going on, and the average American doesn't have a clue about how bad this thing is and how many places are impacted by what's going on. So I'm sitting there one day and something, I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I'm reading my paper in the morning, the Times, a front page story that a new report has come out. It's called Ready, Willing, and Unable to Serve. And the report says 75% of the young people in America can't qualify for military service. And I said, I'm reading the report, get out of here. So I go to my researchers, I say, look, they must be talking about black kids, right? They say, no, they're not talking about black kids. I said, no, you can't tell me 75% of the kids in America can't qualify for the military. Now look, I'm from back in the day, right? So I admit that. And when we were growing up, we never thought joining the Army was considered a high water mark of a quality education, right? Like, oh, if you get B's, you might be able to join the Army, right? How could it be that we have a country that the average kid can't get into the military service? I didn't believe it. I said to my researchers, get me the original data about why this is going on. Get the report. It says, all right, 25% of our kids in America don't finish high school. Now, this is not new, but when I was a kid, you didn't need a high school diploma to join the military. Now you do, right? Okay, I got that. 30% of the kids in America who have a high school diploma, their diploma is really meaningless. They can't pass the entrance exam to get into the military. I said, okay, that's bad. 10% of the kids have a felony arrest. Now, our country has come up with a strategy for dealing with poor places like Harlem, which is simply, when we don't educate all those guys, we're simply going to put them in jail, right? We incarcerate more people in this country than any place on the face of the earth, and I'm talking about per capita. 744 people per 100,000 incarcerated here in the U.S. No place is even close to that. You look at our competitors. You want to know what they're incarcerating in the UK? About 115 per 100,000. China, who we're competing with, Probably about 140. 744 people. It's costing us a fortune. No one's close. So, yep, the felony arrest, okay, I got it. It's still not enough. I say you still can't get to 75%. I know 30% of the folks have, they have bad eyesight, other kinds of disabilities. I'm still missing a chunk of people. Here's something new. 27% of the kids in America are so obese, they can't join the military. Now, this is brand new. This was not the case when I was a kid. See, to be in the military, you don't have to run a marathon, right? But you have to be able to run from this wall to that wall, right? Without taking a knee, right? How did we let this happen? How did we let this happen? Now look, if the health disparities in minority communities were not already bad, disproportionately so, how did we let this epidemic touch so many of us? So, and we've all been part of this. We've all been part of this, and we've all watched this and said nothing. And you say, well, Jeff, no, come on, Jeff, you're blaming me. But you watch it like I do. You go to a movie theater, what happens? Go to a movie theater, you go in and you say, I'd like a small popcorn, a small soda. What do they say? For 25 cents, we'll give you this much more soda, right? And I'm like, let me get this right. For $15, I'm getting this much soda. Now for a quarter, you're going to give me, how does that work? And you know what? So when you say no, what do they say to you? It's only 25 cents, right? They say it every single time. Now, you ever ask yourself, how much soda is in one of those large cups? My wife Yvonne and I, she's from Harlem. We go to the movie theater. They have the special 44-ounce take-home cup, right? 44-ounce take-home cup. Now, who do you think wants the take-home cup? You think my wife and I are sitting there saying, let's buy 6, right? So we'll have that's for kids. That's for kids. You serve a kid 40 ounces of soda. That ought to be considered child abuse. You can't do that. How are you going to teach a kid that that's okay? See, now it's again, it's a young audience. I'm old. But back in the 60s, we knew how much soda was a one-person serving. 12 ounces. 12 ounces, that's what you bought. You bought a can of soda, 12 ounces. Now, in my house, we didn't have any money. There were 4 boys. My mother get that can of soda, we all had to share. You'd be like, no, you're getting a little, right? We drink, that was good, right? Because she knew it was no good for you. She knew it was no good for you. You didn't give no kid. No one drank a quart of soda when I was growing up. The whole concept was foreign. We've allowed our children to grow up where in certain communities, now you're not going to see this in every community, certain communities, we've allowed the norm to become so dangerous. It's almost lethal for our kids, and it is the norm. So, what did we decide to do? Not for everybody. People confuse what we do at the Harlem Children's Zone. Some people say, oh, they run schools. Yeah, we run schools. But this is not about a school. This is about a place. This is about a place that was so toxic that my kids didn't stand a chance. Something was going to get them, right? Prenatal, might get them. Early childhood, yep, going to get them. If they got through that, elementary school, schools are terrible, going to get them. If they got through the terrible schools, middle school, you know what that's like? It's going to get them. And if you somehow manage to get through middle school, high school, the drugs, teen pregnancy, the gangs, it was going to get you. My kids didn't stand a chance. We said that there wasn't one thing you could do. In our country, we have spent all of our time trying to figure out how little we can spend, right, for the shortest amount of time to create a permanent effect. And you know what? It's not worked anywhere. It just doesn't work. Not in the places I'm talking about. It doesn't work. So we said, look, we have to do everything. And people said, now, Jeff, everything? I said, we'll do everything. He said, well, how many? I said, we're going to draw a line around 97 blocks, 10,000 kids. Those are going to be our kids. We're going to save them. I said, wait. You can't do everything. He said, I have a very business-like board. They said, now, Jeff, we love you. You have a good heart. But this is not about everything. You've got to figure out when can you make the most strategic investment that will last these kids, right? I said, well, let me ask you a question. You guys have money? Yep. Oh, yeah, we have money. You're all married, living in, oh, yeah, kids go to a good school, go great schools, great community. I said, so when could you sort of not be there for your kids? Elementary say, no, Jeff, those early years, kids learn how to read. It's really important. Middle school, no, you got to be there for the middle school. High school, no, drugs. How about college? You got to help your kids do college. How come all the rich people know you got to be there forever? They don't blink an eye. If they're away from their kid 24 hours, they're sweating, oh my God, what are they going to do without me, right? Now, but my kids, they want to come up with a short-term plan that's going to be a year or two and say these kids are going to be fine. We don't get that. And it's more than just education. Public safety. Do you know what it's like growing up where people are killed? Kids are killed. You hear gunshots. You know what happens to our soldiers when they go to war? Everybody knows post-traumatic stress. Everybody knows what that is. What happens when that's your daily experience and you're not going home because you are home? See, when you're at war, you're thinking, I got to get out of here and get back home. What if it is your home? What does that do? The mental health problems in our community, the health problems in our community, you're going to just ignore that and say it's a level playing field, everybody's going to be good? No, I don't think so. So we took it all on. We went block by block. When I say block by block, we knocked on every single door in our community with a simple message. We want to make this place better. Will you help us? Now, here's one of the things. People think, oh, you have to reach 80, 90. But you know what? That's what I thought. 95% of the people said, that's terrific. We're with you. God bless you. Goodbye. Right? I took that as consensus. Right? I did. I took that as consensus. We now have consensus to go out here and get to the other 5% of people came and helped us. They helped clean things up. They straightened things up. You know what we learned in doing this work? Optimism is like despair, right? It catches like a virus. It's infectious. So when people despair, other people around them begin to despair. But when people begin to hope again, other people begin to hope. They begin to think, hey, because people thought we were crazy. They said, Jeff, he a crazy guy. He talking about changing Harlem. Look at this filth, dirt, graffiti, all of it. They changing. Then we did one block. But they said the one block, they said, oh, Mrs. Pearl. That's true. We had Mrs. Pearl on that block. They said, you got Mrs. Pearl, you can clean. We did the second block. By the third block, there was a funny thing going on in Harlem. People said, hey, this block looked pretty good. That block looked pretty good. That block looked pretty good. What's going on here? Right? They said, what's going on? You know what people said? They must be getting ready to give this to white people. Why are they cleaning this up? I'm telling you the truth now. I'm just being honest. Because what they thought? Who would do it for us? Who would do this for us? Nobody's going to do this for us. So it must be for somebody else. What kind of sense of community is that? Right? When you don't even think you deserve it, that people wouldn't do it for you. So yeah, we began to straighten this thing out. And you know what we found? Every park we cleaned, every place we eliminated graffiti, every community garden, they never messed it up. 15 years later, the stuff is still in the same condition that we put it in. It never got messed up. There's something about sort of bringing this sense of hope to people that matters. And is it health? Yes, it is health. We have the highest asthma rates ever recorded right now in our community. We have a full asthma program. making sure our kids get the best stuff. We're working with obesity. Violence, you walk down certain blocks in Harlem, you will see my team of adults standing on those corners. There will be no shooting on these corners. Our kids are going to know how to get home safely. This stuff matters to folks. Education is critical. Without education, you're not going to be able to fix this stuff. We believe this is rebuilding community for real. It's engaging folks. It's coming up with plans. It's taking a leadership role. Yes, we're going into St. Nick. Yes, we are. We're right in there. We're going to do a school. We're going to build it in there. But there's some other things that happen. We've got, this year, 900 of our kids will be in college this year. This is no longer an experiment. I know how many kids I have who are 2. I know how many kids I have who are 9. I know how many kids I have who are 15. I know their health condition. I know their education condition. I know their social service conditions. I know what their mamas and their daddies do. I know which kids are in trouble and which kids are not. We have this thing mapped out so that we're going to make sure all of our kids are going to college, and we have one standard, and it is to get our kids in college. It is the only standard. Because it used to be high school. Again, this is just about being old. Right? 25 years ago, if you asked me what we needed to do for poor kids, I said get them through high school. All the data showed kids got through high school, they had all of these better outcomes. Doesn't work anymore. You got to get these kids through college. And this is, this is just to level the playing field. There's a lot of controversy about college. Jeff, you're getting all your kids in college. And college is not for everybody. It costs so much loans. Yes, all of it's true. But I don't have plan B. I don't know plan B, and I just tell folk, some of you are not going to like me for saying this, but this is what I say. When in doubt about what to do what rich people do, right? This is a funny thing because I have to raise a lot of money, right, which means I have to be around a lot of rich people. I tried to raise money from poor people. I'm just being honest, right? It didn't work. So, but I found this funny thing. There's a funny thing about rich people. You know what their expectations are for their kids? All of them going to college. They don't have 3 and say, oh yeah, I'm thinking Harvard, I'm thinking Columbia, but I'm thinking hairdresser school. Never heard it. Now what is that about? What is that about? A sense of expectations for your kids. And those same people sending all their kids to college wonder why you talking about all these other kids got to go to college. I say, when I meet one rich person who says college is not the goal for my kid, then maybe I'll say the same about my own kids. Until then, I'm going to simply do what they do, right? When in doubt, not a bad strategy. So this idea of, can you go into a place? Now, I'm going to just tell you this last thing. In 1993-94, Mayor Giuliani was mayor of New York City. Harlem was the kind of place where the city owned so much real estate because no one wanted to live there. The place was falling apart. Giuliani tried to give the housing away. Nobody would take it. Can you imagine such a thing? There are lots of places like that right now. You couldn't give it away in Harlem. People come in there, he said, whoever, just raise your hand if you want it. No one raised their hand. You don't think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. You know what all my rich friends say to me now? Jeff, when I was coming here 15 years ago, why didn't you tell me to buy some of that Harlem real estate? You know what that stuff is going for now that they couldn't give away? Right? That same brownstone nobody wanted, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000. It was never the place that was bad, right? It was all the stuff going on that made people feel like it wasn't worth nothing. Message I have to folk, some of this is going to take leadership from us. Some of this means that we're just going to have to go in. People said to me, who told you could draw a line and decide? Well, I was like, I couldn't do it. I didn't know. I just decided I'm going to save my own kids. I'll tell you this. This is what I've learned the hard way. I grew up thinking there was a master plan somewhere, right? People had it all worked out. It was simply above my pay grade, right? Because someone else had the answers. But you know what? In the last 6 years, I've met a few presidents, a few secretaries of education, a few secretaries of labor, some directors of domestic policy. There is no plan. There is no plan. You know what happens when they meet me? They say, Jeff, can I talk to you a second? What do you think we ought to do? Are you asking me? You guys are running the country, y'all. Look, you know what I realized? No one's coming. Our communities are the social service equivalent of Katrina. You remember all the people standing saying, come help me? Nobody's coming. We're going to have to save our own kids. That's all this is. What we decided to do at the Harlem Children's Zone, we decided we're going to save our own kids. Nobody's coming. For those 10,000 kids that are my kids in Harlem, I take personal responsibility for them. I say every kid that fails is my failure. It's a personal acceptance that these kids, no one else is going to help them, that we've got to do everything that looks like middle-class America for them. You want to know what we're trying to do? We're trying to recreate middle-class America. The values, the principles. Oh, you will not wear your pants down around Mr. Canada. No hats inside. We have straight talk. You're not going out there to have no baby. You're not doing this stuff. You are going to college, and you're going to live a good, hard, responsible, legal, moral, ethical life. That's what we want for our young people. They have to hear that from us. Everything else for our kids is death and destruction. They accept any other messages out there. It's going to destroy these kids. So we think, is it doable? Yes. Complicated? Yes. Hard? Yes. You have to hold people accountable? Absolutely. But I don't know of a plan B. So for us, Harlem Children's Zone's plan A. With that, I'm going to stop and maybe take some questions. Thank you very much.
Now, conventional wisdom would say that we should have the staff pass the microphone so that they can snatch it back from you when you get carried away. But because we actually have the luxury of time this afternoon, we're going to go ahead and do it with the lining up at the microphones. I did have a question that I wanted to start you off with. In listening to you talk, one of the things that comes to mind is, why did it work? When you try to do the type of change that you were trying to do in your community, it's almost like you have to have a perfect storm. So what were the elements for you to have this perfect storm? The timing, the people, the resources. What were the things that converged into this space that said, green light, it's time, go, we got to get it done?
Well, you know, it's really funny, and it's not what you would think. And I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but it's true. So I was meeting with a foundation person, and I had the same problem that most people in this room have, which is I wasn't trying to figure out what worked. I was trying to figure out what they would fund, right? People hearing me? Because that's what you have to do, sure. Right? So I had this one, and her name is Nancy Rube. She's the president of the McConnell Clark Foundation. She wasn't president then. And she came to me and she said, Jeff, I understand you have this plan. I said, you have this plan. She said, well, I want you to write the plan and give me everything it's going to take for the plan to work. And I interpreted that as, you've got probably $1 million, right? So I gave her the $1 million plan. And she looked at the plan. She said, Jeff, is this everything? I said, what do you mean? She said, is this everything? Can you guarantee this is going to work? I said, no, give me the plan back. So I came back with the $4 million plan. Right? And I'm just being, this is true. She looked at the plan. She said, I read the plan. Are you telling me this is everything you need to make this work? I said, well, you know. She said, Jeff, is this? I said, give me the plan back. The plan I came back with was a plan that took our budget from $8 million to $100 million in 15 years. It's outrageous. It was outrageous, right? I bought her the plan. I gave her the plan. She said, Jeff, this is the plan. I said, this is the plan. So you're going to guarantee me this plan's going to work? Yes, I'm going to guarantee the plan's going to work. She said, great, when you going to get the money? This is true. This is true. I said, I thought you were going to give it to me. She said, no, I just wanted you to write a plan. Do you understand that that's really what happened? I wrote a plan that would really work if it was funded. I had never been liberated to come up with an answer that wasn't tied to what I thought I could raise as money. So I was always coming up with plans. They weren't necessarily going to work, but they were the best I could do for the money. This time I actually drew a plan that would work. And now selling the plan was a totally separate enterprise, because now once I found out, she said, well, I have some, I don't have that kind of money, I don't have that kind of money. Now I am obliged to do something that I learned from Marion Wright Edelman. Now, Marion Wright Edelman, the head of the Children's Defense Fund, I'm the president of her board, and we are friends. But before I was president of her board, we were looking for a retreat place to run the Black Community Crusade for Children, and we found the Alex Haley Farm. Now, Alex Haley Farm has as much to do with farm, right, as Alex Haley had to do with being a farmer. This is a beautiful, right, sort of compound, and we went there for our retreat to crusade, and we needed it, and it disappeared. And the people originally they were going to give it to us. They said no. So I said, Marion said, Jeff, I thought, you know, Marion's a very religious woman. I thought God was giving that to us. Obviously, it wasn't the case. 3 months later, it came back, and they said, come on back down. So Marion and I came down. We went. We looked around. We were just smiling, like, oh my God, we're going to get this place. So they said, are you interested? We said, yes, we're going to get it. Marion said, we're going to get it. So I said, Marion, where are you going to get the money? I don't know. I said, you don't know? She said, no. She said, but sometimes you got to step out on faith. Funny thing, right? People say stuff like that, and they don't mean it. It's funny when you hear someone say it, and they mean it. She stepped out on faith. She got the money. We got the farm, right? This idea of what do we need to do for our young people? Once I accepted that I really thought I had an answer, then I had to go out and I had to sell this concept to a bunch of folk. And I spend most of my time raising money. And if anyone's here now with money, I'll be seeing you in a minute. Is what I do. But the idea of creating things that work is almost a foreign thing in our business. Because so much is determined by what we think people will pay for. It stops us from thinking things through to their logical conclusion, right? So we had a logical conclusion, which I had to get kids through college, right? Now, 15 years ago, I had like 7 kids in college. That seemed to be like a crazy thing. I got like 1,000 kids in college now. That logical conclusion, if I had stopped it where the money ended, I'd have got kids through the 10th grade. Would that have been success? Absolutely not. So we took it to its natural conclusion, and then we had to go out and we had to raise the money to do that. So that's some of the forces that got me to do something which, to a lot of people, by the way, I'm going to just say this. The amount of money that we have to raise at the Harlem Children's Zone is outrageous. I have to raise about $50, $60 million a year. It's a lot of money. People find it outrageous that I'm raising it, but before I was raising it, people thought I was crazy to even say I was going to try and raise it. So it wasn't like there was a lot of other people doing this. It was just this thing that we had to do, and we figured out how to do it. It's a totally separate part of the business of fundraising. But the answer is costly and complicated. And most people, when it comes to these communities, the complexity stuns people, and they don't solve the equation, right? I keep telling I don't mean this to sound bad. I keep telling people we're not dealing with the flu here. We're dealing with AIDS, right? You understand? AIDS, there's not one thing that could do it. They had to create the cocktail. People looked for years for one single thing, and they gave up. They said, now you're going to have to be on this very complicated regimen, right? But that's what it took. So there we are. We have the same kind of complexity in doing the work we are doing. It's not one simple thing. It is complex, it's difficult, it takes lots of skills, but that's what I think is necessary to be successful.
And I'm going to ask for your patience at the microphones because I have one follow-up question related to that. you know, the part about raising money, I think we all go through the money hustle and the agony of that every day, and balancing it out with the vision and what you really feel needs to happen. On one hand, during the perfect storm, you have to raise money. But on the other hand, sometimes, depending on where you live, depending on your place, you almost have to raise community.
Yeah, yeah.
What did you do to raise community? You know, you 95% of the doors on which you knocked, it was thanks, but no thanks and keep it moving, and you only got the 5% of your foot soldiers going. How did you sell it? How did you raise community for this work?
Well, here's part of the complexity of the work. In the Harlem Children's Zone, one of the programs we have is called Community Pride. It is our community organizing arm. It's what they do. Full-time organizers, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, a team of folk are out there knocking on doors, talking to folk, trying to re-engage people in community. Because, you know, I don't know about your community, but community meetings in Harlem is like a blood sport, right? People, but this is what happens to our communities. Everybody dumps on these communities, right? They put the trash depots there, they put the bus depots there, they put the jails and the prisons and all that. So after a while, the community gets real good at saying no. Whatever the question is, the answer is no. So when we went in with an idea, the answer was no. Who are you? You're not going to do this here. And one of the challenges we have in communities like Harlem is you have the professional, right, meeting people, right? They go to every meeting, right? And I call I don't want to be I call them the crazies, right? You know why I call them the crazies? Because the meetings are so dysfunctional, all the regular people stop going. They're like, no, I'm not going to go waste another 3 hours in that meeting. I got to prepare dinner, I got stuff to do. So the people who are left are the people who like that kind of craziness. Now, you go in trying to be sane and have your plan and your choice. Ain't nobody listening to that, right? So let me tell you how we got around that. But this is how we got around it. We said to our community, if you want to come to our meeting, meet us on Saturday and help us clean up the lot. People who want to do meetings don't want to go and clean up dirty lots, right? They feel like that's beneath them, right? They're the meeting people. They're the guarders of the community. They're the ones who say what does it. They don't go and do work. And if you did not do work, you could not come to our meeting. And you know what happened after about 2 months? The people in the meeting demanded that folk do work together, and they didn't want to hear from those other people. So when people, by the time the official sort of naysayers got involved, and they started saying, who are these people? The community was like, excuse me, you mind your business. You were not there on 118th Street, right, when they were shutting down this stuff, cleaning that place up for our kids. We don't want to hear from you. And part of this is gaining legitimate respect through hard work in community, because these things take a long time to plan, but nobody has a year to plan. People want to see change this weekend. And so we were like, yeah, we're going to plan for the year, but let's figure out what we're going to do on Saturday. And so after you do a few things, people begin to understand, okay, this is planning, but this is also improvements that are immediate, that you can see and you can touch and you can smell, and you know this is not the old style, right, hustle, because so many people came in and they hustled the community. They came in with plans, they took the money, no one ever got any jobs, nothing ever changed. And so people were like, you know, y'all are all hustlers. Getting the work done and being a visible presence while the work is being done, we thought really made a difference in folk beginning to believe. And by the way, I'm doing a short version, right? This went on. The building the community part went on for 3 solid years before folks were really convinced we weren't going away, right? First year, people saw improvement, they said, yeah, big deal. Second year, like, you know, these guys are pretty serious. By the third year, people were like, okay, please come into my block, help me with my block, because they realized this thing was real. So part of the effort is a sustained effort over time. None of this stuff is done overnight.
Thank you. First question.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm from New York, and I first met you reading the book Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun. As a young person, it really helped me to understand violence in my Queens neighborhood. And I think I've been following you in one way or another since then. And so my question to you was, I think when I heard you talking today, I felt like you were able to help me see what it means to turn financial capital into social capital, and how how that capital becomes sort of a complex web in a neighborhood. And so my question is, from a futurist standpoint, what are the intergenerational conversations, and who are the collaborators going forward to help you sustain the new web of problems that come with, now I got 1,000 kids in college, but now can they sustain mortgages and live healthy lives? And, there's more work to do beyond the 4-year, curriculum of a college classroom. And are those kids coming back to the neighborhood? I think the thing that gives you a lot of credibility is that you are made, born, bred, worked in New York City, and that's where your leadership has come. So I just wanted to know if you could comment.
It's a great question. It's got a couple of components to it. One is this issue of the length of time it takes to create and sustain change. This is what I fundamentally believe. These problems are never solved permanently, right? People are going to have to work on this way after I'm no longer at the Harlem Children's Zone. So that's the A part. The B part is one of the reasons that organizations like mine, I think, have not been successful is that they have not had clear succession plans where they have intentionally made sure that a younger group of folk had the skills and the relationships to continue the work at the same high level, right? That's been a failing in our business. It's like when you get to be in my position, it's like you're the king, right? You stay until you die, right? And people do that, and it's wrong, because what happens, and it will happen at the Harlem Children's Zone, is that my board is my own board. They love me, I love them. They're not going to be like, we got to get rid of Jeff, right? So you know what, they'll just start whispering, Jeff ain't what he used to be, right? He's slipping, right? But they won't get rid of me, right? And if you won't get rid of the person, then guess what happens to the organization? It begins to go down, right? And everything, yeah, it used to be this, now. So I think it's incumbent on us to be very clear about our own plans to leave. And within my organization and within my board, my plans to depart are very clear. They're very finite, and it's very close to happening. And I have built in the next layer of leadership in the organization right now. I have a group of young leaders one of them will run the organization in a very short period of time. That is intentional. Okay. And it's not because I'm tired, I'm not burned out or anything else. It's that I'm 60 years old, right? And you need to have someone come in when your organization is on the way up, right? So that way when you leave, people say, wow, it's even better than when he was there. If you wait till the organization is going down, guess what happens to the next leader, right? They say, since you took over, look what happened to the place, right? I mean, but I'm just being real, and you see the same pattern happen in churches and not, people will not sort of sustain leadership and allow folks to develop those relationships to be successful. We are being very serious about that right now to make sure that next generation is going to step into the Harlem Children's Zone when it's going up. And I just think it's going to be a model for what I hope other folk are going to be able to do. The challenge I have right now is in the next couple of years just making sure the financial obligations don't sort of make it difficult for the next leader. And so we're in the process of taking care of that by doing a really serious endowment campaign for the organization.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Cassandra.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Jobert, and I'm from Fresno, California, and we're really excited because we have a Promise Neighborhoods planning grant to work in the 93710 zip code, which is the poorest zip code in the state of California with population over 1,000. And we've been looking at, obviously, other applications around the country, and most of the time folks say that they are birth to career, but they really start at age 3. And so we're really intrigued by the work that you're doing. Wondered if you could talk a little bit about what you're doing with the baby college and that very early because we think it's important to start really when people are pregnant.
Yep.
So could you talk a little bit about that and what some of the challenges have been in implementing such a long-term initiative starting that early?
Well, the Center for the Developing, I think it's called the Developing Brain or Developing Child at Harvard, is really fascinating because for some of the first time, not the only place that's doing it, they're actually getting the pure physical science connected with the behavioral science. We're actually looking at what happens inside of those young brains and why it's so critical. So here's what science has made really clear. Language and other cognitive acquisition skills in those early years, that first 2 or 3 years, happens at a tremendous pace. You can actually track the neurons being developed in those brains, and they develop massively, and then they begin to disappear as the brain becomes more and more efficient around language. It's just some of the most fascinating stuff going on out there. And so all of that talking, baby talk to babies, the cool, that's actually critically important stuff. So in lots of communities like mine, people don't think anything's happening with that baby at all. They think that baby just sitting there crying and pooping and whatever, and that's the extent of it. And the most highly educated families, they realize those brains are receptive and actually being developed with skills that will last a lifetime in those first 3 years. And it is such a critical period of time, and we realized no one was having serious conversations with our community about it. This is not something you can just tell a mother, I want you to, talk more to your baby. What does that mean? People don't understand. What does that even mean? What does it look like, and why does it matter? It's really critical. So we started Baby College. We give it for parents of children from 0 to 3. It happens on Saturdays, 11 Saturdays in a row. We make sure that we actually expose parents to the science, but actually give them real live examples about what to do. It's around health, it's around nutrition, it's about why you should play and sing to your kids. There's a set of behaviors that we associate with races and classes around child rearing. So here's some things that I tell parents, right? That you want kids to be able to question you and ask questions. Not in my culture, you don't, right? Kids don't question adults, they do what you said. You want kids to be in relationship. A good kid is a quiet kid who sits there and does nothing. That's what people believe. They spend all that time and energy trying to get that kid to behave, when what you really need to be doing is stimulating that kid and allowing that kid to question and ask and do all of those kind of great things, right? So here you have 2 parents, one who's very poor, the other who comes from a college-educated class. They both have 2-year-olds. Everybody's raised a 2-year-old knows at some point you give that kid a glass of water, they look right at you and dump the water on the floor, right? A little experiment, right, to see whether or not things will stay in their state. No, things change from one place to the other. Now, what's the responses to that little experiment? You got one guy, give me that cup, what are you doing? You pour that on that floor, give me, don't do that no more. What's that message, right? He got another parent say, ooh, look what we've done. We've created a puddle on the floor. Oh, I think you're going to have to help me get some stuff. We have to clean up the puddle, right? What's that message, right? Experiments, language, right? Consequence. So here you have folk both thinking they're doing the right thing and no one explaining the difference. That actually this is good. Because how you tell a parent, a kid pouring a glass of water on the floor is good. My neighbor, yes, no, that's okay. That wasn't a terrible thing. You have to use a great teaching moment. Right now, you can use all this language. Spanking kids. Using physical coercion and punishment to try. It's a terrible thing to do. Except you know what the problem is when we go to our community? When we leave the room, all the parents say, yeah, well, it didn't hurt me. Right? Because that was their experience. They believed the kids who didn't get spanked are the ones robbing the stores. People believe that stuff. So, and then what you're saying is not being translated to parents in a way that they can grab it, understand it, and use it. And Baby College is the place that we do that. So we think it's not the answer, right? Baby College, not you do Baby College, you don't have to do anything else. It's like saying wealthy parents just spend the first 3 years with their kids and then they ignore them, right? But it's the beginning of what we hope will level the playing field, and so we think that that's critical and important.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lark Galloway Gilliam. I'm from South Los Angeles. I came to a conference Policy Link held a couple years back with you, and I had this aha moment where I recognized that we talk about the prison industrial complex. There is also this poverty industry that we've created, and unfortunately, when you look back, I mean, that's where a lot of us are employed. I think what you do is fabulous. My question would be, what, if anything, are you doing or is being done in your community to really try to build up entrepreneurship, jobs outside of sort of that poverty, our own sort of struggle and pain? Do you think that that's part of that comprehensive model that you've described?
It's a great question. And I was doing some writing on this very issue, and I'm going to disagree with you, but hopefully in a very respectable way. And let me tell you what my disagreement is. Something is fundamentally changing in the economic model in the United States. It is changing. I mean, all the data is so clear. The well-paying jobs are disappearing. They're being replaced by really low-wage jobs. Only folk who have the highest education skills are really getting quality jobs. And this is happening at a pace which is staggering in this country. They just released yesterday, it was in the papers this morning, right? 46.7 million people on food stamps in America. It's unheard of. Food stamps is welfare. This is another deep thing going on. Now, we grew up on welfare. When welfare was really welfare, people treated you bad. You didn't get food stamps. You got cheese and peanut butter in a can, right? And you had to go get it and be embarrassed bringing it out. We used to try and hide it in our cabinet so our friends wouldn't know we was on welfare, right? So you stopped welfare, and then you got food stamps, which was still slightly embarrassing, right? Because you went to the supermarket and like, ooh, they got food stamps, right? When they changed the name of food stamps to SNAP, I said, must be an awful lot of white people on food stamps. Now you get a card, look like a credit card, like any other card. It's become the norm. So what I'm saying is that we've been the country. So when you listen to, and this is, look, this doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. I'm just using this as an example. You listen to people saying black people don't want food stamps, right? You heard 2 presidential candidates make that statement. I'm saying, excuse me, it's all the white people on food stamps. What are you talking about? You're thinking 30 years ago. This whole fundamental change has happened in our economy where huge numbers of, men, white men, very clear, unemployed, unemployable. Very clear, this thing is huge in America, what's going on. And so I don't want people to think that there is something about what's happening in black and brown. The person who did the best work on this, in my opinion, Bill Wilson, when work disappears, he laid this thing out, what happens in our communities when work goes. The men suffer, families, marriages, all this stuff starts to sort of fall apart. So part of what's happening, I think, in these communities is a structural change in work and employment, and no one's talking about it. They're talking, it's in I heard some of the debate, they're talking about, all the low-wage jobs and the other things. But these are the big macro forces, huge big macro capitalist forces, which are driving in our communities very strong right now. So you say, well, what do we do now? The only answer I know for my kids is to get them college degrees. I don't know, even with that, it's going to be a struggle. But I honestly don't have another answer for how you're going to change that big macro economic change that's happening. If you begin to look at what's happening in Spain, these are not third world countries, what's happening in Italy, what's happening in Greece, you're talking 30, 40% unemployment. It's unbelievable. It's unheard of. That fact that this employment issue is now impacting huge segments in our country is something that I think we have to be concerned of in a totally different life I'm on the board of the Open Society, George Soros' society, and we're really looking at this changing employment picture in this country because work is not what it used to be, and our communities are the most devastated by it, but this is now a national thing. And the last thing I'll say on this is, when the Obama administration first got in, I was on one of the transition committees, and what I challenged his domestic policy people, I said, right now, unemployment is so high, you're going to consider it a success if we get unemployment back to 7%. Meaning all my people who've been unemployed for 30 years, you're going to be like, it's fine as long as these folks who lost their jobs get them back. And that's not the work we're in. We're trying to level the playing field for these other people also. And I think we're in that place right now. I think one of the big challenges we have is that everybody are thinking about the folks who had a job 7 months ago and don't have one today, and they're not thinking about these communities that have had this long-term challenge. So it's not something that we're unaware of, but it is something that we think these macro forces are the only equalizing thing we know is college. And I honestly don't have another answer for what we're going to do because the other challenge, I think Angela probably talked a little bit about this, if she talked about sort of the change in demographics in this country, right, and how this country is becoming a majority-minority country, you're not going to be able to sort of say, let's simply think about where we can connect these communities that are minority communities and white communities. This thing, I think, is pretty large. And I'm going to tell you, the reason I don't feel bad about not being able to answer your question is I've been talking to the top economists in the country about this. And I'm serious. We're bringing them in and saying, guys, give us some help on this. All they said to us is, the best thing you can do is not let them shred the safety net, right? Don't let them destroy that safety net because that's the only thing that's going to be keeping people from starving. Short of that, when we said sort of what's the hope for employment, how are we going to, nobody has an answer that I think is a really good answer. So it's not like we discourage entrepreneurship. I'm all for it. It's just that these macro forces for us are something right now that we don't know an answer for.
No, and I would agree with you. I just think we do need to start having that discourse because I don't think the answer is a job, and I don't think the structure is there anymore to support that. So we need to create a new alternative.
I will just say this last issue. I was in, some years ago, Marion Wright Edelman and I were in Europe looking for folk schools, which ended up not even being around, but we didn't know. Longer story. But we were in Denmark, and the Danes had this very high suicide rate, and this was before this economic crisis, and they thought it was because folks couldn't get jobs. They had very high college graduation rate, but the kids would graduate college, but there was no jobs for them, and they didn't know what to do. And they were saying one of the things that we have missed, and I think we've missed this in this country, we have not been able to help our kids develop a definition of success that is not connected to employment in a real way, right? That being a good father, husband, spouse, wife, that this is important in and of itself, that almost means nothing in this country because we've so magnified wealth and the accumulation of wealth as the only defining characteristic that we care about. So I think that we've got a lot we can do to try and help folks sort of try and figure out who they are more than just a job, even as we're trying to prepare people for work.
I'm going to, and for those of you at the microphone, again, I'm going to ask for your patience for a second and interject a question here. Some of what you just talked about really speaks to some of the systems issues that we're facing nationally and locally in the work of the Place Matters teams that are some of these people in the room here is really about looking at how do they change systems through policy interventions, advocacy, community engagement, so that the construct changes, so that everything within the construct can change as well in a sustainable way. In doing the work that you've done with the Harlem Children's Zone, where were the policy targets, the policy asks, the systems change type of things that you thought were necessary to sustain this work? So when it's time for you to buy your island and sail your boat there, you're able to know that your successor has the construct within which to be successful.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that just on the policy end that we've been trying to sell to the administration, the Obama administration, but to Congress also. The first is there is a belief that nothing works. I mean, a fundamental belief that all of this money is wasted because nothing works. And we are up against that, and we think the only answer to that is real data. Real scientific data that says this is what it costs, but this is what it produces. So I am a real evaluation proponent. I believe that good intentions are not enough. And some folk who are in the field are upset with me because of how much emphasis I place on evaluation. Now, I don't think everybody's got to be evaluated, but I think before you say, do this piece of work because it's going to save these kids, you've got to have some evidence that that is true, right? And so, and gathering that evidence is hard, and getting measurable results is almost impossible, right? And I mean it's just the level of rigor that you have to have in an evaluation to say something works is really, really tough. And here's one of the biggest mistakes. This is a bit of a catch-22. Part of the reason it's so hard to get evaluation results is that you need to be talking to an evaluator while you're developing your program, not after, right? So I have 3 full-time evaluators that work for me. They're on my staff. They work for me. They help us both design and evaluate our programs before anybody else gets to see them. So I don't want to have the evaluation come and be like everybody else saying, I hope this works, right? I want some evidence that we've designed it right and that we're on the right track, right? So this is, now here's the rub. That's easy to say, but nobody wants to pay for it, right? Everybody wants to evaluate. You know what these evaluators cost? This is not like cheap labor we're talking here, right? But so people with the foundation, everybody say, I want evaluation, I want evaluation. Well, pay for the evaluator, nobody wants to do. And I would say that some of us, and I think we're one of the organizations, we've got to build this right into our budgets and make this part of the, I think, way of doing business. So this idea that, because we've had the Republicans and the Democrats over at the Zone, from Capitol Hill pushing for promised neighborhoods. And for both of them, this idea of do you have measurable results is absolutely critical, and we've built that in the plan. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this stuff costs money, right? And I don't mean a little bit of money. When Angela and I went to the administration when they first said they're going to do promised neighborhoods, and they said, what would it take to do this? We said you have to spend about $25 million a year per site, right? So we told them, that's a good number. With that, you should be able to get some real measurements and some real accomplishments. Right now, I say that now like it's like, oh, 25 million. Do you know how hard it is to get 25 million out your mouth, right, when you're going into one of these places? But the truth of the matter is, part of the reason we've not been successful is that we just haven't had enough resources to actually deliver what we need to deliver. And so we have pushed the administration to up the thinking around this. So giving a community $10 million, right, to do promised neighborhoods is not considered some huge thing. And you know what? On the scale of things, it's not in the way the country spends money. It's really not. It's really nickels and dimes. Right. But coming up with a framework, a way of thinking about this, we think is absolutely critical. The last thing I'm going to say is that this idea that this is either education or after-school social services is something that we feel as a policy has been a huge mistake, right? This is not a question of whether or not you have to provide arts and sports and culture for a kid to learn algebra, right? Want a kid to learn algebra, get him a great algebra teacher. But don't deny my kids the kind of developments that they're going to need for the rest of their life that's going to keep them healthy and productive. And I think this idea of hard academics plus social services for our communities is something that we have really pushed the administration to understand. We want health, We want mental health, we want dental health, we want recreation, we want culture, we want academics, we want all of that as a package. That's part of what it means to deliver a promised neighborhood. So those are some of what we consider to be the real policy areas that we've really focused on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is David Zisser. I'm a community development attorney at a civil rights organization. A quick comment, and then I have a question. I'm not sure if this was the intent, but the comparison to the poverty industrial complex and the prison industrial complex, the main difference is that people in anti-poverty work, which I think we're all in, we're trying to put ourselves out of a job. The prison industrial complex, they have no interest in putting themselves out of a job. So I'm not sure it's a fair equivalency. My question, I actually have two questions. I'm going to try to be really brief. One, out in the civil rights world, there's this movement among fair housing advocates to look, instead of developing communities, giving people the opportunity to move out and go to wealthier, whiter communities. I'm curious about your perspective on that. I have my own. I have a feeling it's more in line with yours, but I am curious. Second, and you touched on this earlier, but I want to ask a bit more about it. I'm wondering if you're nervous at all about the fact, and I don't mean this to be flattering, but you're probably one of the most charismatic leaders and dynamic speakers that most of us have had the pleasure to listen to, and you bring a relatable story. You're approachable, but you talk tough, and kids get they pull up their jeans when they see you, and you can fundraise, and you can talk to poor people and rich people and white people and black people. That's an unusual mix of traits, and it's one thing to bring up the next generation and have them replace you in a few years, but I'm wondering if you're nervous about the sustainability of this model without a leader like that can raise $50 million a year and scare the crap out of the kids when they come around the corner.
Thank you.
I think both great questions. Let me deal with the tougher question, which is this idea of I'm calling it, for lack of a better word, giving people a voucher to leave their current circumstance and go to a better community. Clearly, poor people in wealthier communities do better than poor people in all poor communities, right? Data on that's pretty clear. I won't argue with that. If I'm going to be poor, I'd rather be poor in a wealthy community than in a poor community, because you're going to have better schools, better housing, better hospitals, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely the case. This is just because I'm old. When Henry Cisneros was head of HUD, they were going to do Hope 6, he asked me if I had ever been in the housing projects in Chicago. And unfortunately, the answer was yes. The housing projects in New York are bad. I had never seen anything or smelled anything or experienced anything like, Cabrini Green. And he said, you've been, I said, Henry, look, I don't get scared in many places. I was scared in here. He said, what can we do? I said, I don't know. He says, I think we're going to tear them down. He said, I don't think that's going to help. I just don't know what else you do. And maybe we'll give people vouchers. Now, what I heard was that a lot of places wouldn't take those vouchers. That those same folks from the housing projects, they weren't going to take them in these middle-class places, and they said no. So that was the first pushback I had, that maybe this is not such a great idea, because people might say no, right? Which was the A part. So another person said to me, Jeff, why are you trying to make the ghetto a better place for people to live, right? Shouldn't you just be getting people out of Harlem? And my answer is, under the right circumstances, I've watched these communities become places that people do want to live, right? And I've watched, if you come to Harlem now, you see plenty of white people. A lot of us who grew up in Harlem in the bad old days said, you see white people, they're out walking their dogs and running in track, and who knew? You didn't know. So there's not an idea that anything in this country is so permanent when it comes to race that quality won't change it. So the question is, if you can create a quality experience, you'll find that all kinds of people will come to it. And so I'm not ready to throw in the towel on places like Harlem and simply say there's nothing we can do except ship all the people out. I think that you can rebuild these places And you can actually create a mixed income community. Now, the problem with Harlem is it tipped too quickly. It's now a very wealthy community. Poor people can't afford to live there anymore, right? So that happened too fast, but it proved to me the point that it could happen. And I told people in Baltimore, Baltimore ain't going nowhere. Don't let nobody tell you this place is not fixable and you can't. Detroit ain't going nowhere. Someone's going to be living there, and the question is who? And if you can fix it up, right, you'll find that people get attracted back there. Now, that doesn't solve the employment issue, which I was talking about before, but I'm a real believer in the things that make these communities feel unlivable. It's crime, right, isolation, and despair. Where you have people who are hopeful without a lot of crime, right, you find livable communities. People like it. I love it here. I've been to places, I was like, why would anybody want to live in this deserted place, right? But people there were happy and it was healthy and everything was fine. So part of this is how do people perceive the safe and healthiness of their community? And some communities are toxic and they're unhealthy, right? And it's not because of the place, it's because of all these other things. Here, I think as a nation, we're going to have to figure out how to turn these into healthier communities. I just don't think it's viable for us to think that we're going to be able to give folk access to other places. Because if you have followed some of these places, the outer rings around Chicago, guess what happens? Guess what happens when you don't fix the problem? It goes to that next ring. And then you know where all the people with money, they go to the next place. Right now you've got like 2 rings of poverty and despair going on. So part of this, I think, as a country, is that we've made bad investments. We haven't decided that prison is not an option in these places. We got to fix these places, give these folks real jobs and real skills. So that there's something about the moral hazard. People know this whole concept of moral hazard. You give folks stuff and you actually make it worse for them, right? So we have a problem with thinking we're building independency by giving people stuff. What folk need to learn is job skills, but then there have to be jobs for folk at the same time, and that's part of the challenge. Now, I got so focused in this other issue about leadership. I think I'm not foolishly modest. I think you probably need to have the set of skills I have to raise the money I've had to raise, right? That's not something I say everybody can go out and raise $50 million. The work, the actual doing of the work to me is similar to running a great emergency room. Now, I don't know about your city. In New York City, we know if you have to go to the emergency rooms, which ones to go to and which ones to stay away from, right? Because they're not all the same, right? But you just think about an emergency room. Our work that we're doing is like running a great emergency room. You don't know what's walking in the door, right? You have an emergency room that's great with heart attacks and lousy with gunshots. Guess what? Don't walk in here with a gunshot. You got to have an emergency room that's great with all of that kind of stuff. And even after all of these decades, we haven't mastered making all emergency rooms great, right? But the idea that some are lousy doesn't stop us from saying we need great ones and every community needs to have one. I think where we are right now is we're doing the first emergency room. It's complicated, it's messy, but you know what? I was around for the first heart transplant. You got to be really old. Person died. We celebrated. They lived for hours, right? It seemed like, and only this one person in the whole world could do it. Now, heart transplant, dime a dozen, every place in America they do them. Part of the skills, part of what happens in our business is people look at something and they say, no one else could do it. And other sciences, people look and say, well, how can I do it? Because obviously everybody can do it because they did it, right? So I think this is where we are right now. We did it first. We didn't do it perfect. We're still learning. Other smarter, more talented folk will come and learn to do it. You do need a complex set of skills to do the work. You actually have to know management and evaluation and program development. You have to know that. But this is not sort of unheard of. You need a complex set of skills to run a good emergency room. So I think that's the comparison. And I think that right now, I don't want people to think about this as sort of this impossible task to do. It's a complicated task to do.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Canada. My name is Benny Patterson. I work for a national organization here in D.C. One of the things that I believe that the Harlem Children's Zone actually did for Harlem was it provided a paradigm shift that provided, in a sense, a catalyst moment for the community. And you did that in part by convincing the young people that they deserve more and they were actually worth more. And, you know, when it comes to that, the organizers in the room would actually call that, you know, the community actually being exposed to the power and the ability to actually bring themselves out of their own situations. And then a lot of times, you know, when it talks to health equity and when we actually go towards that, the most important thing is kind of, in a sense, to do what Harlem Children's Zone did is to look at the young people. A lot of times when it comes to health equity, we look at them as recipients of the work instead of actual advocates actually producing the work or helping to actually push for the work. So number one, when it comes to the Harlem Children's Zone, they were active participants when it comes to, you know, changing the conditions that were around them. So if you can actually speak to the necessity of youth engagement being, you know, being a necessity instead of a strategy when it comes to, you know, helping the community actually approach their problems.
Well, I think you bring up a very important point. You know, young people who rebuild their community, A, they don't destroy it, they don't deface it, and B, they actually feel like it's a great place because they've been part of changing it and making it better. When I grew up in the South Bronx, it was a terrible place. And we defined success as getting out, right? Those people who got out were successful. Those people who didn't were failures. If young people think that way about their own community, the one thing you'll guarantee is that all the talent will leave, right? And the folk who remain will feel like they're trapped there. And it's not a worthwhile place. So we thought the way you get at this is by getting a group of young leaders to demonstrate in the community what positive youth development actually looks like, right? So now I'm going back 15 years. We were working at that time with only 15% of our adolescents, right? We invested very early in 0 to 12, and not that heavy in 12 to 18. And people criticized me for that. But I said two things. One, what we needed in those first few years was an example of what real solid Harlem teenagers would look like, right? Because up until then, they were defined as kids hanging on the corner hustling. You were a kid in Harlem, you made money, right? And you hustled to make money, and that's what people saw. The good kids were nowhere to be seen. You could never find a kid doing the right thing publicly. There was no opportunity to demonstrate the kind of positive skills. So we found platforms for kids to do positive things, to come into elementary schools and teach, to come into middle schools and do plays, to do health fairs and other. So suddenly there was this group of, and there wasn't many of them, there's this group of young people in Harlem saying, hey, we've got something positive going on. Because what we bet, we know this to be the truth. 10-year-olds look at 14-year-olds as role models, right? They're not looking at me. They're looking at this kid who's 3 years older and stronger and all of that. So if you don't have any role models for those 10-year-olds, you're going to always be fighting upstream, right? So we wanted to give them role models, and we gave them a group of role models. And here's the other thing we realized. This sounds tough. It is tough. I think we did the right thing. Everybody's not going to agree with it. We said, I don't know if I can save every 15-year-old 15 years ago. But I said, but I can save every 5-year-old. Now, guess what happens 15 years later? Those 15-year-olds, how old are they? They're 30. Those 5-year-olds, they're in college. I solved that problem. Part of this is an investment in time and energy in a way that built a new image of what it meant to be a teenager in Harlem. So now you just think, I have 1,000 kids in college. Those kids come home for the summer, they all work, about half of them, maybe 60%, they work in my after-school programs. So all my 3rd and 4th graders, they see all these kids in their community, they're all in college. Looks like everybody in Harlem is in college. It's like, and you know what happens when everybody's in college? You know what the kids say? How did that idiot get in college? I could get in college if he could get in college, right? But isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you want? Don't you want kids to find folk that they know they're smarter than, that are in college? It changes your whole view of what your life expectancy is. Before, only the geniuses from Harlem went to college. Kids were like, I'm no genius. I'm not going to college. Now every child that they run into is in college, and kids begin to say, of course I'm going to college. Look who they're in college. Everyone's in college. Of course I'm going to college. So part of this was happened over time. You wouldn't have found that 15 years ago. We just had some role models then. We had a group of kids who were demonstrating what we wanted the future to look like. Now I got that future in place. Those kids who were modeled after, they are now the ones who are actually doing the work. So I think this engagement of young people, of making sure, so there are, if you come into Harlem, on any given week, there's something being done by our young people that just shows them to be smart and talented and gifted and caring, and this gives them an opportunity to do service and to show the other young people what it means to be a teenager in Harlem. So that, we think, is part of the DNA of our work, right? It's not a separate strategy, it is sort of the strategy, right? Young people growing up believing that they have a place and it matters, and that they are going somewhere that is not a dream, but is an everyday reality for them.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. And so we're going to engage in a little bit of rapid fire Canada.
Good. Okay? That's aimed at me. I know. I go on.
Oh, no. So what I'm going to ask is that we have our 4 finalists at the microphone. We're going to end it with you 4. When you ask or frame your question or your statement, I'm going to ask that you do that in 20 seconds or less. I'm going to tap you when I need for you to wrap so we can go on to the next one. We're going to try to get everybody in, okay? Michael.
Michael Scott, Equity Matters, Baltimore Place Matters. I met you doing Freedom Schools. But so I'm interested in this model notion, right, of social entrepreneurship. So one, what are some of the tougher lessons learned, some of your failures, what you would have done differently? And then secondly, as you look to go from, innovator in heart transplant to common, vision with me a minute and tell me what needs to take place for that to happen, speaking to the complexion as well as the complexities.
Yeah. So this issue of, I think, what did we learn? One of the biggest things that we learned right away was that, you need to be focused on this mission almost exclusively. We used to do other things as an organization. I stopped everything else. We used to run a senior center. I don't run a senior center anymore. The second thing is I will tell you this about data. Data will ruin your week. Right? Now, I want to be serious about this. When you go into places that we work in, and you really want to see what's going on and see what difference you've made, you're going to be stunned at how hard it is and how bad that data looks. And even after lots of hard work, you're going to see that it is going to take huge amounts of effort to get this thing going in the right direction. So this is what happens when people look at data that's ugly. They don't want to look at it anymore. Or the other thing is they want to make it better than it is. So there's a way that we have of dealing with problems that I had to learn how to stop. Because you'd see something, it'd be bad. So we worked at something 4 months. You say, okay, did the kids do any better? You look at the data, everybody start doing this. I think, well, yeah, but it wasn't all bad. When it starts off with that, you're in a real bad place. It was all bad. The biggest problem I think we have, that I learned, is that admitting that you failed is hard because everybody gets deflated, right? All these people, they work so hard at something, and suddenly you look at them and say, that simply did not work. And then people think you're saying you didn't work hard, you didn't care enough, you weren't. No, I'm just saying the data said it doesn't work. And you can't let people try to explain to you why you shouldn't be disappointed. which is a whole industry I think we have, right? So there's a little thing we do. So we have transparent data. We put all our data up on a big board. Everybody comes together, and we look and see how we're doing. And we ask the directors to come up and explain. And the saying goes, the longer they talk before they get to the numbers, the worse the data's going to be, right? Person gets up, they say, so if you look here, we had a great summer. Let me tell you 6 of the activities we did. They're going on. And we're just like, oh, this is going to be bad. Because the data is, the person who gets up and says, now, see where we were in September? Look at that number. Now, look at where that data you know is going to be good, right? So here's the challenge. When you're doing something really hard, and if you're not brutally honest about the data, you don't get better, right? Now, if the funders, we've got any funders in here, let me say this. If the funders will not allow you the time to get better, right, then you better pretend the data is better than it is, right? So I'm being honest now, right? But we tell funders, we tell them, we're going to get better, but we want to be honest about where we are. So when I see something and it's terrible, I want to say, yeah, we did not do that well. And let me tell you what we're going to do to make this better. This lesson is something that we have to relearn almost every month, right? Because you get better, then people get a little cocky, right? They say, yeah, we're good. Then you get some really bad stuff, and then they get even better at telling you why you shouldn't be concerned about it, which means you won't get better. And so this idea of getting incrementally better, I tell folk, if you get 10% better every year, guess where you'll be in 5 years, right? You'll be terrific. No one does it. I can't do 10%. We can do 10%, right? Every year. So part of this is a lesson about how you use data, being honest with data, and being transparent, and being able to tell people who worked really hard. That's it. This last issue, thank you, she gave me the cue, that am I worried about the skill set of how we routinize this? No, I don't, because there's a couple of things going on. People are writing about it. People are studying it. You know, we're a case at the Harvard Business School. A lot of folk who study in the work. The challenge about complexion, right, is a very interesting challenge, because one of the areas I'm very concerned about is in lots of quality schools, people still think of this work as the work for the less than gifted, right? You don't have to be that smart to do this. I'm really talented. I want to go into law. I want to go into medicine. I don't want to necessarily do this work. And so we find that lots of people of color who have the skill set aren't interested in the work because they don't consider it to be intellectually challenging and stimulating, right? And that's a problem I think we've got to get across to folk, that was the old days. That's not the new day where we're calling for new kind of management.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Canada. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Jalon White-Newsom from West Harlem Environmental Action. Just had a quick question for you. So you talked a lot about, I think, education equity, which basically is giving all children a fair share to be successful. But I think you can't have education equity without health equity as well as environmental equity. So you know there's a lot of environmental stressors in Harlem. And I just wanted to hear, you know, as a part of your program, have you addressed that with the children in terms of the environmental stressors and the obvious health outcomes that, again, can really damage their success? Have you made that a part of talking with the parents and kind of advocating on some local issues? So just wanted to get your feedback on that.
So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I know WEAC and the work you all do. I couldn't agree with you more that the environment really matters for young people. Dealing with the issue of asthma, you know, you begin to look at sort of the triggers for asthma. You got people using pesticides that are absolutely toxic. You got folks with infestation of, rodents and insects, which we know are triggers. And you got the issues, of the bus transfer depots and other things, which we think really matter in terms of the environment young people are growing up in. I think that part of what we have try to get our parents and families to understand is this more holistic approach about how they're living and why certain things really matter in terms of I think the health of young people, green space, fresh air, parks and playground. One of the things we did, we replaced all the playground equipment in all of our parks in the zone because it's terrible stuff. It's all cement and old stuff that kids fall and break their arms and legs. And if you have kids and you can't take them outside, right? I mean, that's just a recipe for stress in families. Because what are kids? They're going to run, they're going to jump off the furniture. You're going to constantly saying, stop, no, don't. Versus letting kids into a natural place to play. And these places have to be sort of healthy for young people. So I think this idea of should you be looking at the total environment for young people absolutely matters. I think it's becoming clearer to us, at least as an organization, and to others, that the health of the community in general is going to have a positive impact on how young people grow up and what they think about themselves.
Thank you. Margaret?
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for the stimulating conversation. My name is Margaret Morgan Hubbard. I'm the CEO of Eco City Farms in Prince George's County. And there are a couple of things that I wanted to react to and discuss with you. One is that we know how to raise money in this country. I mean, we can look at this very destructive national campaign that's going on, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars sitting around destroying us. So there's plenty of money out there, and we've got to figure out how to not waste it in those ways, number one. Number two, about the entrepreneurship, we also have plenty of work. We just don't have jobs. So one of the things earlier, there was a presentation of the 18 things we need to live, and those 18 things, whether it's food or community or art or any of those things are things that we can do to rebuild our communities. The question is how we do them collectively and how we make them into our life's work. That's number two. The other thing I was thinking about is this thing about comparing ourselves to wealthy people. And that makes me a little uncomfortable, so I've been trying to figure out what's my objection to it. And it is true that they go to college, but what they do at college is very different from what my kids or I did at college. And I think that they went to college not necessarily because of their intelligence, but because it was their legacy to go to college. They were entitled and they got it. But they didn't learn anything, and they didn't learn how to be cooperative and how to work together and how to build together and how to share their knowledge with the rest of the world in a way that would make an impact. So I want to try to change that paradigm a little bit and think about that yes, we're doing the same things because they work, but not for the same reasons and not in the same ways. And then finally, this thing about being replaced, because I also am an older person running an organization, and I'm thinking that we don't have to be replaced by another person. We can be replaced by a team of people. And I think that that's really what we have to start building, is teams of people who have collectively a bunch of skills. Right now, we're trying to pull every skill we have, and it's exhausting, and we have leaders, and we have one person doing the work of many people. And I think it's time that we had each person do a little bit of work, and all of us take a rest.
Great, and I just would just remind, thank you, and I think you've raised some really important points. I would just tell everybody, don't take anything I say too seriously. Right? I mean, I talk about rich people, I talk about white people, I talk about black people. I don't take anything I say. I'm trying to make a point, right? And I want you to get the larger point. And sometimes, I use these sort of verbal tricks to get people thinking about, how people see the world, right? And it's just this sense of how do we see the world? And the world is seen really differently based on sometimes your economic status, sometimes your racial status. And what I'd like to do is sort of even that out a little bit. So I just want to be a little clear on that. And I think this idea of, how we make sure this work continues to move forward. I'm going to just say this one thing that's been said a couple of times that reminded me of the 60s. And and then people weren't old enough to have been back in the 60s when they said this, which is the profession we're in as helpers and whether it's part of a poverty industry, right? And people have mentioned that, and I've chosen to be in this. And when I chose to be in this, you were basically doing this because you were going to be poor, right? In the 70s, when I got out of school, you didn't make any money in not-for-profit work. I mean, you went in with everybody else to try and make a difference, but I don't want folk to feel like there's not real value for individuals. You know, in lots of the European countries, the government takes the role of not-for-profits. They pay a huge amount of taxes, right? And the money goes towards providing a social safety net, which is much stronger than here in the U.S. In the U.S., the only thing we have is this field that tries to level the playing. Now, people could argue it's the government's job, but I don't want to worry about the number of people who would die and be homeless and hungry if folk felt like this was going to be somebody else's work. So I just want to, I agree that there is, you don't want to build independency and make it so, you know, you're working well and other people not doing well allows you to keep your job. And I think someone reacted to that. But I just really want, part of what worries me in this country is that we don't get the best and the brightest who want to come into this work and make a difference, because it is so demanding, it is so hard, it is so complicated, and I think we need more folk to come in. So I just wanted, that had nothing to do with what any one person said, but I just wanted to say that because I think we have a push on one hand in people thinking about this work as maybe not being demanding, intellectually demanding enough for the best and the brightest. And I don't want those of us in it to be discouraging about what it means to work in this field, just at a time when I think it calls for folk at a much higher skill level. So.
Great, thank you. Last and final question, comment, no pressure.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation and your work. You clearly built the model based on your community that you know, and it seems like there's a lot of replication in LA and Detroit and Baltimore. If we think about the data, which is depressing, if we look nationally, the South, the Deep South, is an area that's often left behind, and while the conditions are different than the high density in many of these large cities, the things that you mentioned about low expectations, people leaving, people feeling trapped there, lack of opportunities, violence, all those pieces are still replicable. And we look at the data, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama are 1, 2, 3, or 48, 49, 50 on all indicators, always bad. Any ideas or any thoughts of how this work could be translated into some of these Deep South issues, or any work that you know is going on?
I mean, it's a great question, and I agree with you that one of the challenges, I think, for Promise Neighborhoods, which is what the administration has called our work, is how does it roll out in different regions? And PolicyLink, Angela's organization, spent some time very early on thinking about what a regional approach might look like for Promise Neighborhoods. I think basically this what we're doing is so common sense that it does. So let me just put the principles out clearly so everybody will get what they are and why I think that whether it's Native American or rural or urban or something that it really is the same set of issues we're dealing with. The first is this sense of rebuilding community, right? And it's this sense of community, and I don't mean just bricks and mortar, I mean a sense that this is a healthy place for young people and families to live, that people want to be there and not leave, that it's safe, right, that you're not being murdered, that it's not being overridden by drugs and alcohol or amphetamines or any other drug, that to me is fundamental in our work. And whether it's Native American with some of the alcohol issues or other, this to me is part of what has to happen. The other is this issue of a pipeline, starting from birth and staying with kids until they graduate college. I don't think that's regional. I just think it's the same everywhere. The issue that's sort of the most complicated for regions is scale. We talk about reaching enough people so you change normative behavior. What's normal, right, in Harlem 15 years ago, right, was that kids went to jail, boys went to jail when they turned 15, 16, and 17. That was the norm. You could expect that we wanted to change that norm so that kids go to college, right? So this issue of reaching enough people so you reach a tipping point. So kids are exposed to normal behaviors which we think are positive versus normal behaviors which we think are negative is this issue of scale. It's different in different regions. Harlem is much more condensed. Other places are much more rural. But the scale issue, how many kids do you reach, I think remains the same. We think you have to reach 70 to 80% of the kids to change that normative behavior. You're only reaching 30% of the kids, we don't think you change the normative behavior, right? So that's the scale. This issue of accountability and holding adults accountable and the use of data to drive results we think matters regardless to the region that you're in. So we think the basic fundamental building blocks of our work would hold true for most communities. That each community, in Harlem, housing might be the issue. It may not be the issue in some other community. Some communities, it's the drug that you're dealing with is methamphetamines, and some is crack cocaine, and some is heroin, and some is alcohol. Different issues, but they call for, I think, a similar kind of response in terms of what we need young people to know and how we need to address some of these issues. So I think that what we have said to all communities is that we don't say replicate our programs so that you have to have baby college. We say you have to have a great early childhood strategy. It could be nurse-family partnership. It could be, but it needs to be driven by results, right? And so part of this is communities coming together on their own, determining what their own priorities are, and adhering to these four sort of large sort of standards. Rebuilding community, creating the pipeline, making sure you deal with scale and accountability as the issues that we think will change and drive the change. I just want to say I am running right out of here and jumping in a car to go back to the airport to catch the plane. And I did mention my wife is from Harlem, and I have to get back home to stay married. So I'm just saying, unless it's a proposal for marriage, I am going to be dashing out the door. So I don't want people to think I'm rude when I'm leaving.
With that, thank you so much. Thank you. And for all of you, there is a reception following this in the grand ballroom. Also, we'd like to remind you to make sure that you turn in your evaluations. Lastly, clear the path so Mr. Canada can get out of here. For those of you who are old enough and know about Dagwood Bumstead, it could be a bad situation. So just let him get to the door. Thank you.
It shines so bright that your soul feel right. Love is pure gold, yeah. Won't you wake up, walk in the light. Won't you wake up, bring substance in your life.